everyone loves a good origin story, right? So let's hear the Doctor Zero Trust origin story.
So I tell people, like, I'm not joking, like I'm super lucky to have had any success in life or in cyber at all, just because it's a constant bumbling into luck and having good people around me. Like, I joined the Navy as a diesel mechanic. Like, I had nothing at all to do with computers, whatever. The way that I got into cyber was totally by accident.
So how did you, like, was your exposure to Zero Trust, was that very directly related to what you got up to at Forrester, or were you exposed to this prior to that as well?
So, after I did all my cyber and crypto stuff in the military, and then I went to do stuff for the government, I actually taught and wrote curriculum for computer network exploitation, which was the government's way of billing for really expensive stuff when you're doing red teaming. So I did red teaming in the government space for quite a while. And when I was talking with John Kindervag, who I'd known when he was still at Forrester, he was talking about the ZT thing. And at the time I was like, okay, sure, whatever. It sounds like marketing shenanigans 101, cool, blah, blah. And then I came to Forrester, and I was actually, I would say, pissed off that they said, hey, you're going to pick up John's dirty underwear and do this ZT thing. But when I started looking at it from the perspective of, if I was a bad guy or a red teamer, would these concepts cause me, to quit and go find another target? And they would. All of a sudden, the light bulb went on, and I was like, okay, John was on to something. So I just went at it. But I did. Like, I seriously argued with my boss, Joseph Blankenship, and other people at Force. Like, please don't make me do something someone else has already done, because I don't want to be second fiddle and whatever. But it turned out to be a good use of my time.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, as kind of a practitioner, right? I'd say that sort of John Kindervag sort of laid the foundations for sort of the modern sort of definition of zero trust. I would say that you, more than probably anyone else, did most to really take that mainstream. So how do you now feel that this baby that you nurtured is finally starting to walk on its 2 feet? I wouldn't say snowball yet, but at least walk on its 2 feet.
I mean, it's good that there's folks that see that there's value to a strategy that makes sense. I'm sick and tired of hearing people bitch and moan about the buzzword and whatever else and all the haterade that comes along with it. Because to me, I'm actually I'm working on a blog right now about, like, look, if you don't buy what we're selling and you don't think this makes sense, please continue being stupid and doing what you're doing, and you're going to be the one that's the slow gazelle. Like, go ahead. I'm to the point now, just with, if there's this massive market moving and all this adoption, and I had calls yesterday with people in Argentina. I'm going to speak in Colombia next month on ZT. If the whole world thinks this is a real thing and you, the haters, don't, fine, be a hater and let me know when you get your ass handed to you, and then come talk to me about ZT.
So yeah, I'm in agreement, right? Otherwise we wouldn't be doing this, right? So what is the and like you look around, right, and you sort of say, okay, what was the tipping point, right? Because there was enough in terms of the actual premise behind why zero trust, right? It's common sense, right? But it's taken forever for people to almost reach that level of common sense. So what was the tipping point in your opinion?
I think COVID was the gas on the fire that was needed, because there was such a move to figure out really quickly how to keep businesses up and running, and then how to also not just kind of open the door writ large and go, I hope we don't get pwned, to the nth degree. That there was enough people that kind of had an opportunity, a crisis, an opportunity, or a crisis opportunity, to kind of step back and go, okay, we can do something different, and here's how we can do something that makes a little bit more sense. Because obviously we had proof upon proof that the other model didn't work. And now with remote and all the other things that we're seeing, and I think I read a paper this morning about how hybrid is kind of been accepted now as the way that work's going to look like. Maybe not everybody has to be in the office unless you work for Musk or whatever the hell's going on over there. And the rest of us can kind of, live like humans. that reality requires us to have that sort of approach, and ZT just happened to be in the right place at the right time with technology that evolved to enable that thing.
Yeah, absolutely, and because and I think also, do you think that not just sort of COVID and the move to hybrid work, etc., right? But do you think it was also a greater realization of what that threat landscape now look like, right? And sort of, and I know you talk about how ZT almost equates to assume breach, or actually vice versa. Assume breach is the fundamental on which ZT is then the answer.
Yeah, I mean it's funny because that used to be such a sticking point for people to be like, accept that you already have a compromise. Oh no, we're that's not
Yeah.
a thing, and that we're not compromised, and there's no we have millions of dollars into this, and it's like, oh, I mean, okay, let me write this down because you'll be pinging me in 6 months. And now that seems to be, it's not a knock on a person or something. It's just the reality of the space. So accept it and then align your resources around it to work your way past that problem. It doesn't have to be. I would say it doesn't have to be a negative, really, if you think about it differently. And the other haterade that's so all over the place right now is, well, this is not new. Correct. It's not new. This is an evolution and a maturation of something that makes a lot of sense and has made sense for a long time. Like you said, people just ignored it because people are, I don't know, people. We suck in general.
I think you actually it was on your LinkedIn or Twitter recently where I think you put something up, something along the lines of there is no patch for human stupidity, right, or something along those lines. Sorry to misquote you if I did, but I'd like sort of just. I know our listeners are going to be experienced sort of security professionals, and they'll have heard assume breach, they'll have heard of zero trust, right? Just lay it out, right? Why is zero trust the natural answer to an assume breach? Sort of, if the question is assume breach, why is zero trust have to be the answer?
So if you look at the what is required, so let's flip the script for a second and say we're not worried about defense. Let's just say we accept that there's a compromise. Okay, done. Now, what do we not really want to have happen? I want them not to be able to stay in my network or my environment. I want them not to be able to move around. Like if someone breaks into my house, that's a problem. But I don't want you moving in and living with me. So, let's be real about that. If we accept that that's what we're trying to do, what does the bad guy need to succeed in that manner? They need trust relationships from within systems. And John says it all the time, trust is a human emotion. We've built it into computers. If you remove the trusted relationships, it's not that there's going to be zero trust. It's that they're going to have manageable risk based on trust relationships. And that makes the bad guy's day really hard. Like that's what we want. That's where it is. You're not going to never have a breach. You're not going to have a compromise. You're not going to have, I agree with folks. They'll say, well, there's no such thing as zero trust. Correct. Just like there's no such thing as zero body fat because you die, but you try and get really low.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I think the sort of something that you said just there, right, is about make life difficult for the attacker, right? That, I think that, I think we're getting better at that approach, but still, I think too often we don't approach building security controls from that perspective, right? Like, again, like your thoughts, like why? Because it's just so natural, right? Make it difficult for them, they'll go somewhere else.
It's people trying to defend their position at the company in the wrong way. I mean, you got CISOs now, which have got their seat at the table, and great, and that's super awesome and whatever. But I mean, the reality of it is, they're typically trying to justify their position at a company and telling folks that they're going to be perfectly defended or whatever else, instead of that real conversation about like, look, what I'm doing is going to exponentially reduce our risk, and that's going to make this more manageable, and we can keep uptime going and whatever else. I have yet to run into a single workshop with a client that has been about the technology piece of ZT. It has 100% been about the leadership issues that you face there.
Yeah, exactly, right. And I kind of sort of some blogs that I was reading last week around how zero trust is, or adopting a zero trust strategy is so much about that cross-functional buy-in, right? Way more than it just being a security program for the security organization, right? So what do you see, like, if you contrast, okay, actually, before we get there, for organizations that are adopting zero trust, would you say there are any thing where an organization is doing zero trust wrong, or would you say that anyone who's doing zero trust should be credited?
No, I think there's a way to do it wrong. I think if you're not understanding where you're starting and you're not having a very real conversation about the things that are most important and working your way outward from there, like we've talked about for a long time, then you're missing the forest for the trees. Personally, my methodology and anyone that I engage with is the first thing that we're going to do is, maybe it's not a real world red team, but I'm going to throw a scenario at you and then I'm going to sit there and watch and see what happens. Because until you've been through the stress of that situation and you've actually had your feet to the fire, it's all pontification. You know what I mean? If the reality of security is to make us survive past a breach, which is one of those oh my god moments, then we need to react based on what will actually occur. And I've had so many companies that have said we're ready, and I go in and drop the situation folder in front of them, and then you watch the heads roll, the arguments happen, the people running out of the doors, and it's like this is where we begin. This problem is solvable. This is a management leadership issue. Technology, that's gravy, baby. That comes later.
Yeah, 100%. So what is then, right? How does an organization do this right? Well, what is the playbook that they need to adopt to do zero trust, adopt a zero trust strategy, be successful with it, be able to measure it? Let's unpack that.
Well, I think the first thing is like I say, is put your feet to the fire and understand from not just the security team's perspective, but all the way up and down as much of the food chain as you can get involved, like what would actually go bonkers when something does occur, so that way you've at least experienced the misery that will come. So that's an organizational piece. The second thing I think that is critical is having a really good understanding of the totality of assets that's touching that enterprise, that network, whatever, because I can't defend what I don't know about. And then mapping your controls based around those gaps that you see. If you think about it from the perspective of the general on the top of the battlefield, right? And I can look out across everything. Mm-hmm. If I can do that, I can vector resources to plug the gaps. I don't want to be underground and then looking up and going, geez, I really hope I'm putting the right things in the right place on this battlefield.
And for organizations that sort of start this journey, right? Where do they commonly come unstuck?
Usually they go too big too fast. They'll say, actually, it's a good example. I was working with a bank, a large one, and they said, well, we're going to do ZT for users. I was like, cool, super, great. I think that's a positive. And they said, we're going to roll it out. We're going to start with 5,000. And I was like, whoa, that's not small. And they said, oh, well, we're a global bank, whatever. I was like, that's not small. And they said, okay, well, what number should we start with? And I said 5. And they were like, 5? That's not even worth our time. And I said, well, if I breached 5 people at your company, would that wreck your shop? Okay, fair. So, and then if you get it right for 5, you do it for 10. And if you get it for 10, you do it for 50. And then you roll, like you sharpen the blade based on grinding it against the metal rather than coming in swinging and think you got it right.
But how do you pick the 5, right? Did you say, right, pick these specific 5 that meet these profiles?
Yeah.
Or was it, all right, let's start small?
For me, it's about who would be, if you're going to pick those 5 individuals, who's got the most admin access in a system? Those 5, those are the people I want to focus on first. And if they come back and go, well, one of them's the CEO, okay, well, we have a real issue there. Why the hell does the CEO got admin access to things?
Yeah. So, like, there'll be folks listening in here and thinking, right, okay, what are those little pearls of wisdom that Dr. Zero Trust is going to shower us with, right? All right, it's because, like, I'm struggling with this Zero Trust strategy, right? So, like, what would that be at this moment, right? Based on sort of what you've been seeing happen, what's like, here's my pearls of wisdom.
I think the biggest thing is treat cybersecurity just like you treat the other pieces of your business. How many times have we been in meeting with the CEO and they say something along the lines of like, everybody's in sales at this company, And does anyone stand up and go,
Yeah.
"Oh, screw it, I'm not, no way, I don't." You're engaged because you're part of that organization, and sales is critical to the business success. Guess what? Cybersecurity is the same way. So talk to people like they are a part of it, and they need to be engaged in it. And on top of that, I think you should also quit investing in solutions that are not technical controls, because this is a technology fix, and treating people like they're pieces of gear is stupid, and you won't get the return on it. It's a great thing for investors, and it's good for the VCs, but put them up there. Like, I'll find me an organization that has trained themselves out of no compromise, and I'll bring in some folks that will wreck shop real quick.
So actually, you kind of you started talking about about vendors, right? So and vendors have for sure have jumped on the zero trust bandwagon way before the practitioners did, right? What is it like what is it that vendors have done to, I'd say, corrupt the zero trust market?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. Number one, obviously they ran with a lot of it of, we did X, so we're ZT now. Like, well, wait a minute. Like, there's more to ZT than that. There's no button, and there's not a product for it. So that's been one. And then they market it. It almost seems like the ones that were more egregious than doing that marketed it even harder. Like, they were like, if we're going to be this, we're going to double and triple down until somebody calls us out, which, hey, that's your strategy, whatever. And the other piece is the move towards platform, which has been, hey, buy all this stuff. I call it the Walmart of cybersecurity. Buy all this crap that's on our shelf somewhere, and I swear to God, if you buy enough of it, eventually it'll all work together magically, and you'll have the Lego house of your ZT thing, and we'll sell it all to you in one fell swoop. And that doesn't work. It's not. There's portfolios, and there's a very few platforms that are in this space, and that's been what's gotten it most kind of off kilter, in my opinion.
So what's like your message to vendors, right? Who and like zero trust is an important sort of an important initiative for vendors to play into. What is your message like? What is your message to them, right? What do they need to do more to actually encourage zero trust adoption in their customer base?
I think one is just lead with the understanding that the reason somebody's engaging you in a conversation about ZT is because they're asking a strategic question. So be able to answer the strategic question with a strategic value proposition. That is super valuable. And the other thing that I get people on all the time when I do advisory with vendors and whatnot is I ask the vendors, like, tell me where you're at in your zero trust journey. What are you guys doing for your own ZT? Usually I get crickets or a lot of looking around. If you're not doing ZT yourself, why in all of God's wisdom would I buy your shit to do ZT for me? If you don't know how to drive, don't tell me how to move my race car.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So, like, I know you're involved with the Zero Trust demo forum, right? What is that like? What is that doing? From like providing a platform for vendors, but also providing for the end users, for the consumers. What is that enabling that sort of, let's say, other similar organizations?
Yeah, so part of the problem is if you're going to get what I would call good curated content on vendor technologies, is you've got to do a lot of bird dogging yourself, and that can be time consuming. So what we've kind of done with the demo forum is to say, let's go drive the vendors that have a valid claim here, have them talk about the stuff, do some thought leadership, and then literally demo their system. And yes, it's a vendor demo, but it's a demo so that an end user can go look at that and go, okay, I really want to see, I don't know, this X problem being solved. These guys have got really good technology, it seems. Let me go listen to them talk about it. And then, oh, by the way, I can see what that solution actually does. And that, to me, from the perspective of the research side, is makes it where the end user has much fewer steps to jump through to get really good intelligence on what's going on with the vendor space.
And is the focus there, right? And just want to understand this a bit more, because you talk about use cases, right? And we haven't really spoken about that. And what you're saying here is that it's very much specific use cases that zero trust enables, right? And being able to showcase that as opposed to a generic, oh, so right, we enable you to sort of accelerate your zero trust journey. And so is the focus on very targeted use cases?
Yeah, so it's around use cases, and it's also around taking the vendor space and carving up the capabilities into the pillars of the framework. And that way, if I'm, like I said earlier, there's not a whole lot of platforms, there's some solid portfolios. If I'm looking for a vendor that does, I don't know, cloud access management, right? Whatever that is, like just pick your random super cyber ZT term. They do cloud access management or CASB or something. I can go look at this and I can go, okay, these are the vendors that have those capabilities. There's 5 or 6 of them that actually do that thing. I should look at 5 or 6 instead of 247. I think I looked today and added it up, and there was 2,731 vendors in cybersecurity. That's, yeah, wow, that's crazy. I mean, we're talking, I think the numbers that Richard Steenen put out were $60-something billion in the market. Like that's
insane.
It's a great time to be a VC.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, just on that, right? With sort of the vendor sprawl that exists today, right? And do you see? And you kind of spoke about portfolio versus platform, right? As well. Do you see this, or looking into 2023? Do you see that there will be kind of coming sort of the formation of true zero trust platform vendors? So vendors looking at a true zero trust platform scope, right, and building that interconnected set of acquisitions or homegrown products. Do you see that as being real, or are we still going to see vendor sprawl at least for the next sort of?
I think for a variety of reasons, we're going to see a consolidation of a lot of that space. The recession is going to do part of it. We're having the economic, headwinds and whatever else that's going to drive a lot of that. I think we've also kind of saturated the market on interesting, new, cool, sexy things. We've seen a slowdown in that space as well. And APIs now are so good that it is valid to take a portfolio of capabilities and mush them into the operational platform you're looking for. And that's actually the really valuable thing, I think, is if I can say I want to use these guys that are really good at this and these guys that are really good at this. I don't want to buy it all from them, but I want to make them cooperate and collaborate together to give me maximum output. That's where the platform side of this actually does become a thing. And it's kind of a homegrown side of it, but it's because of the APIs that are part of that integration.
Yeah, I agree, right? And sort of, I think we've had this conversation before about really bringing together, and you've been a huge proponent of this kind of consistently, is about bringing together that best of breed capabilities, right? But being able to almost unify them in a single control plane, right? And as you said, right, a lot of that is very much homegrown. You've got to be serious about wanting that and then building that. But do you see that as an opportunity there that exists for some sort of, I'm going to say it like a Lord of the Rings analogy, sort of one ring to sort of, what is it?
One ring to rule them all. Yeah.
Rule them all.
Yeah, I think you can get towards a semblance of that. And the other piece of the use case conversation is there will always be, for different businesses and different verticals, there will always be that one use case that requires them to have a best of breed whatever, which is fine. That's your most critical thing. That's your radioactive. By all means, get the Lamborghini of that stuff. But for the workhorse side of this, that's where this other approach, in my opinion, makes the most sense. And funny enough, when you talk about Lamborghini, everybody forgets Lamborghini started out as a tractor manufacturer.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the only Lamborghini I have is the one that my son made out of Lego, right? And believe me, that took us 6 months to finish. So you spoke about sort of like you kind of alluded to the macro economic conditions. You spoke about ROI. So let's talk about that for a bit, right? At a high level, how does adopting a zero trust strategy deliver ROI, or how do you show ROI for adopting?
So I think one of the best ways that I've seen working with organizations is really what they get rid of as they move towards a strategic side of things. I've worked with organizations that have had at least two, if not three, similar solutions solving similar problems that have been implemented by new teams over time. I think the most interesting one was somebody that had three IAM solutions all doing the same thing. And it was like, well, which one's the best? So here we go. Let's pick that. And if you do that, it was the years before this were lots of knee-jerk responses to new needs, new problems, new risks, new threats. Okay, we've kind of saturated a lot of that. Now the next thing is to go off and go, well, what actually meets the needs? What enables my strategy? Let me whittle away some of the crap that I don't need. And then that budget frees up for other things. And anytime you have a conversation in the business with, I freed up budget, all of a sudden people start smiling. You don't want to be asking for more, but you're good to say, I'm willing to sacrifice some.
But like in your experience of sort of leading a lot of zero trust initiatives, when is that ROI often realized? Because I assume that you may have a hint of it being realized up front, but actually seeing it in the flesh is a way into the cycle. So when is that often realized?
It'll be a while into the process. The good thing is you can scope it out and kind of have, I would say, almost a predictive budget that you can go back and kind of say, as we migrate, year 0 to 3, here's what's going to go away and here's where the budget's going to free up, because we know what stuff costs. And then you can begin to go, this year I'm going to free it. It's the reverse of your budget cycle you did to get the stuff. Now you're just offloading it, and you can say predictively what you're going to free up.
And I guess that's the whole scoping of the Zero Trust program, right, is so important part of that, right? So that you don't overscope at the beginning and thus under-resourced to execute.
Scope creep will eat you alive, and that's why I think it's so critical to really have the leadership conversation, the planning before you begin to go down that, because you don't confuse tactical execution with strategic value, and a lot of people do that. We did this, okay, cool, what's next? That's tactical execution. Strategic value is, I'm marching towards this thing, what tactics do I do that will enable me to keep that march going?
Yeah, and I think that's and I love the way you express that, right? Because I think that's the bit that people miss when they are trying to execute a zero trust strategy, right? That they have that strategic goal, but what they lack is actually that sort of the tactical steps that they need to take in order to achieve that, and then hence they never see they never see the return on their investment, or they never even make the first step, because they're just concerned on the. So moving on a bit, right? Let's think about sort of zero trust and how regulators, government bodies, etc., are starting to really sort of push for the adoption of zero trust strategy, right? Like, what's your sort of, in terms of, I mean, there's of course sort of the Biden administration's sort of EO is obviously sort of like world famous now.
Yeah, it was a watershed moment.
Yeah, 100%. But it's been about 18 months, right, since it got issued. So where are we in terms of actual progress against that?
In October of this year, 2022, the federal government finally formally established a DoD Zero Trust Program Office. And that was, anytime the DoD sets up a program office, that's something. On top of that, they allocated about $1 billion and $1.1 billion to that office and said, go off and enable ZT. So, I mean, in government speak, that's pretty fast. 18 months to get towards a PO with a lot of money allocated to it is fast-ish. And they're starting to put things in place. Without getting myself in trouble, like, I've been engaged in some of the conversations with some of those organizations, and there's there's movement going on, but they're sticking to the strategy that they outlined in the DoD Zero Trust document that was published in the 23rd of November. So they're doing what I think is the right thing, sticking to their guns and moving forward. It's going to be a slog. What everybody kind of read through that strategy document, and they said, oh, the DoD says they're going to be ZT by 2027. That's not at all what they said. They said that they're going to be in a state of zero trust by 2027. If you read through the whole thing, it actually talks about that they won't be in an operational full compliance state till 2032, and that's early. So that's a very realistic timeline, in my opinion.
And do you think do you think it's a program that has got sufficient momentum behind it that it's gonna last the course, or is it still too early to say?
I think it's pretty early to look in the crystal ball, but I do think that the way that they've changed the incentive structure, they went from a lot of stick to a lot more carrot, is going to drive that forward, because where they're going to get a lot of value out of it, and the conversation's already happening, is that they've got the Beltway bandits that are just clamoring and circling like blood in the sharks with blood in the water to come help make that happen. And that's how things get done in government, is when you've got the Beltway bandits coming along and making it actually happen. If you relied on the DoD to do it themselves, the sun would burn out before anything got done.
Beltway bandits, first time I've heard that term, but I get it straight away.
I live near the Beltway, so I see them all day.
So I guess the whole sort of reaction of other regulators, right, and other government organizations like the TSA, for example, right, issuing sort of security directives to things like LNG operators, is a direct manifestation, sort of a direct follow-on from the EO, but also threats to critical infrastructure, right? And that again is probably, the threats are not a good thing, but they're acting as a good forcing factor for the adoption.
Yeah, I tell folks I don't even care about the threats, really. If you spend all your time worrying about the next sexy cool Russian exploit or whatever somebody's going to steal from NSA and release to the open internet, it's a exercise in futility. Really, what you should be doing is looking at, like we talk about in ZT, what the fundamentals are for those things to be successful, because they're physics. There's things that can be sexy and cool way up here. I'm going to deal with the problem down here at the very lowest level and make it where those things won't work. Then a win is a win is a win, and work with that.
Yeah, because it's ultimately it's the same things that keep getting exploited that attackers benefit from, right? That very rarely
in
has changed.
All of warfare, because cyber is a warfare domain. In all of warfare in history, no one has ever had it be this clear what the enemy is going to do to win, and they still sit around going, "Well, I wonder how we defend this." Come on, man! It's the color with crayons. It's written right here.
Yeah, exactly. So coming to sort of it's that time of year, right, where I'm sure you're inundated with requests for, hey, Chase, give us your predictions for 2023. I'm going to put you on the spot here. 2023, what does it hold for Zero Trust?
I think the biggest thing is you're going to see more adoption of ZT outside of the U.S. market. That's the only prediction I feel like I can stand on and say that that's probably going to be realistic. And that's literally because I'm having those conversations with organizations in Latin America, Australia, Japan, India, the UK, the Nordic region. So I think that's the thing that will continue to grow. Other than that, I would say the majority of it is going to be, the same thing, different day with slightly different shenanigans around it.
No, so and do you see that acceleration of Zero Trust adoption? Do you see that specifically in public sector or public sector driven? So more sort of EO type sort of edicts coming from governments in other countries, or private sector driven?
I think internationally it's going to be mainly private sector driven. I do think / wink wink have a bit of insight that some stuff is probably coming as far as public directives in the U.S., But like
Mm-hmm.
cyber is kind of a trickle down space where the U.S. and the DoD are ahead of everyone else, or doing the the first to the bat type things, and it works its way everywhere. So I think Australia, I know, has been doing some work around kind of mapping their essential eight to zero trust. So I think that there's going to be some stuff like that, but maybe it'll happen this year, maybe not.
All right. So before you wrap, right? You and John, right? You go and meet each other for a drink, right? And you're swapping sort of zero trust analogies, right? Who's got the better zero trust analogy?
Ooh, it could go either way, honestly, depending on how many drinks we'd had. To be perfectly frank, so yeah, I mean, John's obviously the Godfather, but I throw some good ones out there once in a while.
Go on, let's hear one. Let's hear the
As
latest
far
one
as like just
you've put
what is
together.
zero trust, I mean, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I'd say zero trust for me is like dating my daughter. You know, I'm gonna know who you are. I'm gonna see what's going on. I'll provide you access to her. I'm gonna monitor what's going on, and then if you do things that are outside the bounds of what I would call acceptable, you're gone. That's it.
Chase, with that, right, I thank you so much for your time. Everyone on the sort of listening into this, Chase, Dr. Cunningham, Dr. Zero Trust, has his own eponymous podcast, Dr. Zero Trust, available on all the usual platforms. Go and check it out. It's a regular dose of the most real, the most actionable content on all things cyber, not just Zero Trust, but you get a whole load of Zero Trust goodness as well there. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks much.